Hi, this is James, and I'm here with the Oracle Outlook for the week starting January the 1st, 2018. Happy New Year! However you chose to ring in the year, I hope it's off to a great and wonderful start. And so I figured since it's a new year, I would work with a new deck. So the deck that's going to be assisting me for this week's reading is the Kadar Fortune Cards. It is created by a company called Magic Tao, and it is printed by the United States Playing Card Company. So one of the things that I liked about this deck was the concept. And so if you've ever been to a fair or a carnival and you've seen those old-time fortune-telling machines, they're called Zoltar. That's what the concept of this deck is all about. So I liked the concept because I've actually seen and experienced a Zoltar machine when I went to the fair here in my local area. The other thing that I like about this deck is that the face cards, which are the court cards or the people cards, they are each gazing into a crystal ball. And so I like the idea because it strikes me that we are all on some level intuitive. And so there are different ways that we all intuit or process that kind of information. So each of the court cards, depending on their suit, process or look into the crystal ball in a different way. So I liked that idea. And then the last thing I liked about this deck is that the artwork has a kind of comic book illustration type feel to it, and it brings me back to my former days where before I got into card reading, I wanted to be a comic book illustrator. I wanted to be a comic book artist, and so my forte at the time was superhero comic books. So I wanted to be the next big superhero action comic book star. So I did that for a number of years, but I did it in the independent or underground arena. And then when I moved from New Jersey, where I used to live, to South Carolina, where I am now, that's when my metaphysical career took off. Who knew? So, but it brings me back to those days where I was immersed in comic book work. So again, we're working with the Kadar Fortune Cards, and as I'm talking about the deck again, I want to also say that it has a playing card deck structure to it. So I'm continuing to honor the request of those of you who have asked me to work with playing cards more. So Kadar Fortune Cards, Magic Tao, United States Playing Card Company. So now I'm going to take the deck in hand. And even though it's a new year, I'm sticking with my basic intention and question, which is what do we need to know for the week ahead. So I'm focusing on that as I shuffle. All right, I'm feeling that's going to be great. I'm going to now cut the deck and fan the cards out. And I'm going to be working with a line of 5, so I'm looking for 5 cards in the fan that are getting my attention. And these will make up the cards for the week. All right, I have the cards picked out. And now we're going to put the deck aside, and we're going to now focus on the line. Starting with the middle card, I always read the middle card as the central issue or something that we're being asked to focus on for the week going forward. So taking a look at the card we have the 2 of clubs. So now a little personal story with this card. So I asked Kadar how it wants to be used, and this card came up. So for me, the suit of clubs can represent work or business. And this card came up in our relationship reading, if you will, because I always do an initial interview relationship reading with the deck, any deck that I get. And so this is about forming a working or business relationship or partnership. The other thing with the 2 of clubs, this card can come up when help is being offered. So this deck wants to be used in a public way because the suit of clubs is also about being social. So it wanted to be used in a public way, and it wanted to be of service as offering help. So that's a little side note about the intention that the deck had in order to be used in my own life. So some of those takeaways, though, are Again, we may be focusing on work-related issues, business-related issues. There may be some people who are working on forming business or working relationships or partnerships. If it's not about that, then the central issue could be about help, offering help to other people, or being on the receiving end of help, because it's about an exchange. So we may be getting some help, or we may be giving some help. So it's about that kind of balance, because that's the energy of 2. 2 is a number for me about exchange. It's also, in a positive sense, it's about cooperation and compatibility. So again, the 2 of clubs could be about forming a working or business partnership or relationship, one that works for both parties. And so as I'm saying that last part, I realize if it's not in the business or working sense per se or specifically, it could just be a matter of focusing on relationships in which it works. The relationship itself works for everyone involved. Now, the other thing here is that sometimes the suit of clubs for me can represent work or effort. So it could be saying too, like maybe there's going to be some sort of focus on putting some work or effort into either a new relationship or an existing relationship, right? And each person in the relationship, because this is about balance, remember, each person in a relationship is willing to do their part, is willing to do his or her work in the relationship in order to make it work. Play on words there. But that is the energy of the 2 of clubs for me. So now let's take a look at the surrounding cards, because they're going to give us more information. So starting with the card on the far left, we have, okay, so here we have the 7 of spades. So spades for me is a suit that can represent difficulties, problems, challenges, blocks, right? So as the first card in the line, I always tend to read a spades card as an issue or a difficulty or a problem that we are working on resolving, right? So it makes sense in regards to the 2 of clubs, where I talked about this idea about work or effort being put into a situation. With that in mind, the 7 of spades can come up when we are having or experiencing some kind of setback. I tend to look at this card as a setback or something that's stagnant. The idea here with the number 7, 7 is a number of improvement. So it could be saying too, like we're working on trying to create some sense of improvement in our lives. And maybe that's where we get the help. You know, because I talked about the 2 of clubs being about help being offered or, receiving help, that kind of thing. So it could be, the idea of either giving help to somebody else with the idea that it's going to help improve a situation that maybe they've been experiencing some difficulty with, or that we're going to be on the receiving end of help, but for the same reason, right? So I'm seeing that because the 7 of spades would suggest like there's some sort of difficulty around this idea of improving something. So I'm seeing that. The other thing here with the 7 of spades, it could be the idea here, and this makes sense with the idea of being in the new year and the first week in the new year, because this is a time where we can make resolutions or set intentions to make some positive or healthy changes. Then this card would come up to say we're wanting to work on eliminating, spades represents elimination, we're working on eliminating some habits, behaviors, tendencies that are not healthy, that are not in our best and highest good. So I'm seeing that with the 7 of spades. So now let's take a look at the next card. So the next card in between the 7 of spades and the 2 of clubs is the King of spades. So we have 2 spades cards back to back. So for some people, when I talked about the idea of something being habitual in terms of a tendency or behavior, then 2 spades back to back could suggest that there's an ongoing problem, right, that we are working on creating a solution around. The King of spades could represent an actual person. So I will talk about that first. As a person, the King of spades can represent a person who is either separated or divorced. So could be working through that kind of issue, and that would make sense with the idea that the 2 of clubs is about trying to make a relationship work, especially if you are ending a relationship to some degree. Then there may be some things that kind of keep the 2 of you together, and so even though you may be separating, you still need to make the relationship work for whatever the reason may be, right? So there is that. to consider. So it's about how can you make that relationship work as it's changing. The other thing with the King of Spades for me, since it represents mental, the suit of spades represents mental activity and decision making, it could be that there is a person, or we're being asked to consider multiple ideas, because I tend to look at the King of Spades as being full of ideas. So it could be saying too, like, we're full of ideas about how we want to improve things, that kind of thing. It could also be like, this is the person who's going to be playing the role in terms of the help, whether it's being offered or received. This could be a person who's playing a central part, because I'm looking at the two cards, and based on the layout, he's the middleman, right? So it could be, somebody who's playing a central role or a central part in that idea of help. And it could be help in terms of offering ideas, because the two of clubs in that regard is offering advice. So it could be some sort of advisor, that kind of thing. Somebody who's a professional, somebody who has knowledge. Because I'm looking at the image on the card, and he has an open book. So for me, that represents somebody who's either well-read, somebody who's educated, somebody who has a lot of knowledge, or it could be somebody who's going to give you access to information or knowledge that's going to be helpful. So I'm seeing that. The other thing with this illustration that I'm looking at is that there's a scale on there. So it's about balance again. So we have that, this idea about balance with the number 2 and then the scales. So again, this is about, being in a situation in which it's going to work for everyone involved. Because I tend to look at this as a person who may be working with the law. I tend to look at this card as somebody who works with the law or law enforcement. So there is that. Now, on another level, I'm looking at the illustration, and he has around his belt a triangle with an eye in it. So for me, this could be about, like, what is your focus, or what is your vision for the year going forward in terms of improvement, right? Because this card is coming after the first card. So what is it that you want to improve on, but what's your focus? And there's also spectacles on the table as well. So there's this idea about the way we're looking at something. It could be saying too, like, are we willing to look at something in a different way, especially if it's not working in the way that we have intended, right? So there is that to consider. But it's also about maybe having a singular focus or a singular vision, or needing to just maybe focus on one thing, especially if maybe you're thinking about all the things you could be working on improving or changing. And then this could be saying too, like, maybe you just want to consider the idea of focusing on one thing. So I'm seeing that with the King of Spades. So now let's take a look at what's on the other side of the 2 of clubs. So on this side, we have the 8 of Spades. So this is a very interesting week ahead, because we have all the cards showing up besides the center card being from the suit of spades. So this is a week where we're being asked to really become focused on solutions, right? If spades are all about problems and challenges and difficulties, the flip side of that is that those challenges, those problems, those difficulties are encouraging us to use our ability to think critically, and I'm going back to the King of Spades for that, but also to use our ability to solve problems and to make decisions. So again, this being a new year and the first week in the new year, we may be taking a look at what's not working in our lives, or what we perceive to be not working, and wanting to create some positive change around that. So having said that, the 8 of Spades in particular for me is a card that can come up when we are wanting to investigate something further. So it's very interesting that that would come on the heels of what I talked about in terms of focus and vision and the way we're looking at something. There may be a situation in which we need to investigate it further, and that may be where the help or the assistance is coming in. Somebody may be offering us information, knowledge, that's going to help us investigate a situation further. Now it could also be, I'm looking at the King of Spades again, and there's books. There's a book that's closed and a book that's open. So it could just be one way to investigate a situation further would be to actually read up on it. So there may be some knowledge being gained through the act of reading. So I'm seeing that. So the 8 of Spades for me, aside from the fact that it can represent investigation, this could also come up when we are feeling a difficulty or a challenge with our sense of power and confidence. So it's making me feel like the information that we get or the help that we're going to receive could possibly build up our sense of either personal power or our sense of confidence. So I'm seeing that with the Eight of Spades. And as I'm looking at the card, I'm looking at the two words at the top and it says the architect. So it could be, again, this idea about creating a plan. You know, what's your plan? You know, what are you building for your future? And what do you need to have in place in terms of a plan? And how are you going to implement the plan? What decisions need to be made? Remember, spades are all about problem solving and decisions. What decisions need to be made that are going to be in alignment with your plan? You know, going back to the Two of Clubs, for me, the Two of Clubs can represent two things: intention and action. So, you know, once you have the intention, once you become aware of what it is that you want to create in your life, are your actions going to be in alignment with the intention? And if they're not, revisit what was the intention. If you're feeling like your actions are a misstep, then come back to what the intention was. Always remember that your action should be in alignment with what your intention is. And if it's not, rethink either your intention or rethink the actions that you're taking. So that is the Eight of Spades. And then the last card rounding out the line, we have, okay, I had a feeling this card was going to show up. So here we have one of the Joker cards in the deck. So the Joker card for me, when it comes up, can represent this idea of a wild card, something that is unexpected, something that comes as a surprise. So there is that. So there could be some sort of wild card, some sort of the element of the unknown. I'm looking at this particular Joker, and the crystal ball that this Joker is gazing into is totally black, right? So it represents the element of the unknown. Or again, it could be this idea of like wanting to focus on something, needing to take a look at something, needing to investigate something further. And for me, the idea of investigation is taking a closer look. It may be taking a look at the things that you are not entirely clear about, the kind of things that you are not sure or certain about. So the idea here is if you're going to be seeking advice about something, maybe stop and think about what are your questions regarding the situation, you know, and maybe getting the information that's going to best answer those questions that you still have a sense of uncertainty about. So I'm seeing that. The other thing about the Joker cards for me, whenever they come up, is that sometimes if we're going through a difficult situation, a problematic experience, keeping in line with all the spades, and we're putting energy into it or effort into it and we're not seeing any results, sometimes this card, the Joker card, can be about how can you maybe see the situation in a different way. It could be saying too, like, we're really being serious about the situation, and sometimes Jokers are all about, is there a way that we can inject some levity in the situation? Is there a way that we can find something to laugh about? Because I tend to look at the Joker as, you know, delivering the truth, but through the lens of humor. You know, so it could just be, is there something that you could laugh about in the situation? You know, or if you're really serious, if you're a really serious type of person, is there a way that you can kind of lighten things up? You know, so that is how I would look at the Joker. The chief meaning of the Joker card for me is all about the element of the unknown or some sort of wild card being thrown into the mix, right? So I'm seeing that with the Joker card. And so on that note, I will go ahead and end and round out the very first Oracle Outlook for this year, 2018. So I'm James Mitchell, and as I close, I'd like to thank you for sharing space here with me for this week's reading, and I look forward to sharing the same space with you again in our next video reading together. So until then, I'm hoping that you have a wonderful day, and I'm hoping that you have a wonderful week. Take care.